Alright, today's video is just about how to make a texture that looks like scales. So this section right here is the part I'm about to fill with my pieces that are going to become scales. So the first thing you need to think about is making sure that you have a bunch of pieces that are the same size. So I have already made these pieces right here that are all just about the same size. I just kind of rolled them up. So my clay pieces that I started with, I just chopped my clay into pieces that were all about equal size. I try not to touch it too much with my hands. And so once I have pieces that are all about the same size, I will squish them up and make them kind of round. But again, don't touch it too much. So as soon as it's kind of round, I put them away. Another thing that is a good idea is after you make these, instead of leaving them out, set them right inside your bag so that they don't start to dry out. If you have extra pieces of clay that are really starting to get dry, I would suggest you get a little bit of water, put your water on your piece that's getting too dry, put it in your bag, and then leave it there until tomorrow. It'll feel better tomorrow. So scales. I have my drawing here to show you what I'm about to do. And what I need you to realize is that when you're making the scales, you have to overlap them, and you almost have to think about it as going backwards. So the scales that I'm making are all going to be kind of pointing down, but I have to start with this bottom row right here. And then the next row is going to layer on top of those, the next layer on top of those, the next layer on top of those. And that's how we're going to make these. So I take one of my pieces, make it kind of round, and then I squish it flat like a tiny cookie. There is my first little round piece. If it's got cracks on it, you can take your finger and rub it along the edge to get the cracks to go away. You could use a tiny bit of water to do that as well. Or you could wait until after you've put all of your scales on to make your pieces really pretty. Now, I have seen people do this a lot of different ways. You could make all your cookies and put them in the bag and then start assembling, or you can make them one at a time. I'm gonna make mine one at a time. So this cookie right here, I still have to score and slip. I'm gonna put it down here at the bottom of this section of my tile, and I score both pieces. Okay, water. If you're in person, you're using slip instead of water. And now I set my little cookie right there on the edge of what I'm doing. And when I squish it down, each scale kind of has a front and a back. The front is what I'm calling this curved part that you're gonna see. I squish the back of it down more than the front. So this part right here is kind of flatter than this part right here, which sort of sticks up. Can y'all tell? And now I take my next piece, roll it up, squish it into a cookie, score right next to this one. Score your piece and water. Some things to think about as well as you're going. The reason you want to make sure that all of your pieces are exactly the same size is the most common problem I see would be students who start making scales and then suddenly their scales start getting smaller and smaller as they go. If you are doing that, then it's gonna make you upset with it. Something else that tends to happen is if you are working with really tiny pieces and making super teeny tiny scales, that is more difficult than making larger ones. So squish it into a cookie, score, score, water, water, squish the back of it. I wasn't really paying attention. I made mine really big. That's okay. And now the next layer. Oh yeah, these guys probably shouldn't just be chilling here drying. Keep them in the bag. Okay, so here's my next guy. Here's our next row. When you start your next row, you want to make sure that you overlap, but you don't overlap too much. So I've got this cookie, score, and now it's going to go in between two. So this part is what I need to score. I'm kind of scoring on top of this one and on the actual tile itself as well, because it's going to overlap onto all of those. Use plenty of water, Put it down so that it's not completely covering up this row. That's another thing I commonly see is people will start their next row and it will essentially cover up the first row. Squish it down real good. And then our next cookie. So as I go making the cookies, I want you to be aware of where I'm placing them. Take your time with it, and they end up looking really cool. Now this side piece right here, that side piece is going to be half of a scale. So when I make my cookie, I'm going to chop it in half. And then 1/2 will go on this side. And the other half will go on the other side. So flat side is on the flat edge of my rectangle here. Squish the back down real good. This half is going to go over there. There we go. And so once you've put all your pieces on, that's when I would go through and clean up along the curve of each one. Clean up along the curve of each one. Make them look nice. And then start your next row. Just don't forget that when you overlap your pieces, make sure they're all the same size. Don't cover up this row completely. Scooch it back so that it's about halfway up your last row. That is how I make scales. Here's my finished piece. So you want to try to keep, here's the first row that I started with, and the next one was this one, and then I went that way. You want to try to keep them in between two, right in that in between spot. And then if it's not completely perfect, that's fine. After it was a little more dry was when I ran in and really made them really clean and crisp. It's harder to do that when it's still squishy. So keep going. Same pattern. Cookie, score and slip. Put it in between. Don't cover up the first row too much. And slowly but surely, you will start to have a scale texture. Enjoy.